Hi, Madhuri. Hi, Suchitra. Welcome back to another episode
Hello.
of It's Not You, It's the Media. And this time we are taking pot shots at one of our favorite topics again: Bollywood, India, movies, all those things.
Yay.
So, and we have a mouthful of a title, and I think, hope our listeners will agree why we had to name it this. We're calling our episode The Screen, the Stadium, and the State. Bollywood comes out to play. Why are we calling it this? Because we want to talk about the uptick in movies about sports nationalism. These are usually biopics, and this is an old favorite genre in the movie world. Hollywood has made a million of them. We all know, the Great Chariots of Fire soundtrack, or the recent movie on Nike, or all the various baseball movies that come out of Hollywood. This used to be my playground, and the underdog coach who takes on an underdog team and everybody wins, so on and so forth. So it's a very old and beloved genre. And I think while in Bollywood and India and generally we've had a few of these, the last 15 years have seen like an insane amount of films, almost 2 dozen, and now with streaming services and Netflix, even more, slightly smaller budget ones.
Yeah.
And I just, of course, the killjoy in us, as we discussed beforehand, can't help but think there is a connection between the unhinged nationalism that India practices and these sports biopic movies, in which, at the end of it, it is always about patriotic pageantry. It's all about deep love and nostalgia for some sort of idealized version of India. And you have this underdog, and the underdog always tends to be from a state or part of India that's usually marginalized. It's somebody who's either Sikh, we're thinking about the Milkha Singh movie,
Yeah.
or we're talking about movies like Mary Kom or Shabash Mittu, which is a woman. One is from Manipur, of course, played by Priyanka Chopra, so that doesn't work. But basically, somebody coming out of an underdog class environment, often very rural, and then making it big. And then when they make it big, the person they thank, or the entity that they thank, is of course the great nation of India. And then everybody cries, and it's very hard not to be swept up. There's a genre, there's a way to shoot these movies, there's a way to really get your emotions ramped up. It's really hard not to feel emotional, not to root for these people, and then not to root, of course, for India itself. Okay, so it's a very sly way of really drilling down on the nationalism. So we have to be very vigilant. Okay, so let's talk about this trend. I think this started actually with Lagan. That came out in 2001, went to the Oscars. It's a 4-hour movie. I've tried over the years to watch it. I have eventually managed to watch it in episodic ways. I think it all began with Lagan.
Yeah. And I found it so difficult to even start with this episode because I don't love sports, but I love sports movies generally. And
Same.
I grew up in a very sports loving household, and have married into a very sports loving household. Um, and have always championed, the underdogs, whatever sport it was. My father, husband, everyone, omnivorous sports watchers. So when you say this starts with Lagan, it brings up so many feelings because this is a movie I saw when I was 12 in the theaters, and I cried and I rooted for India, and I was like, screw the British, like, wow. And it was the David and Goliath movie of our time, and it was so obviously anti-colonial. So I mean, there is no one who is uninitiated, but for the uninitiated, the plot is that um there's a village, and Amir Khan is obviously a part of this village, and there's a very awful feudal overlord of this village who is British, and basically ends up enticing the villagers to play a game of cricket. He gets very mad at them when he watches them playing cricket, and he's like, "How dare you play cricket? Well, if you beat us at our own game, you won't have to pay your taxes." And this comes after a protracted negotiation between Amir and the British
Ah,
guy, because
protracted. There's the
yes,
word.
it's protracted. The whole thing
A
is protracted. The whole
protracted
movie is
4-hour
beautifully
movie.
protracted. It takes you there. It's immersive.
Ugh.
Like we. And anyway, so the point is they have to play this game of cricket that they have to learn from their colonial masters, and they have to beat them. And if they beat them, then they don't have to pay tax for 3 years, which is very intense because there's been no rain, blah, blah. And but if they lose, they have to pay 3 times the tax. Okay, so the stakes are really high. It's life or death. The movie proceeds with Amir Khan literally trying to teach a ragtag group of
Hmm.
villagers, some of whom have disabilities, some are, eventually turn out to be traitors.
Yeah.
There's a white woman savior. I'll give you that. There is a white woman savior who teaches them how to play the game, who is,
Yeah.
um, who's very falls in love with Amir, and they assemble this team of underdogs, and each one of them is an underdog in their own way.
Hmm.
um who then ends up, obviously you have to watch a literal
My
cricket
God.
match in the second half of the game, which is amazing.
Is she going to let any
And
of us talk? Is she going to go on about this film for like hours? This is crazy, Madhuri. You have
and you
to
have
get a
to
grip.
watch. I cannot. You have to watch this, and then the last ball, finally we win. Okay, we are the
Somebody start
villagers,
doing
basically.
these things in the background now.
We.
We the
Cool.
villagers
We. First of all, this notion that this
win.
film is like a poster child of the DEI landscape of today. You know, the caste, the disability, the Sikh guy, the woman. It's
Yeah.
it's just unbearable. Look, I think like it has really heart tugging elements, and it is anti-colonial,
Mhm.
um, all of that. And of course, anybody would turn anti-colonial. Anybody who speaks any Hindi, when they hear those British guys talk Hindi in that accent, you would become anti-colonial within a second, right? So I give that to you. Of course, I kind of rewatched it in a forward yesterday, and it was funny because we don't get much on the impotent king who could just easily pay up the Lagan, the taxes, but they all
Mm.
are like, we love this king. And it's just wild how they ignore the fact that there is a colonizer and the colonized, but then there is this mediating entity of this king who could resolve the issue, but no, God forbid, they just won't. But yes,
And who's also the oppressor? The king is also the
absolute
oppressor.
oppressor, absolute oppressor.
Yeah.
And they make it seem like he's impotent, he has no power, he has no money, or something like that.
Mhm.
Anyway, the movie is terribly flawed. Don't listen to Madhuri, y'all who are not initiated. Partially because it's 4 hours long. It is the most curated, extremely strange looking village ever seen. Okay. And it's just so slow. It's mind-numbingly slow. And the Hinduism of it, the white lady who loves Amir, she's so turned on by the Radha Krishna statues in the temple. And then in the next scene, she puts on this bindi and
Mm.
she's like Hinduized. So everybody's
Oh no,
co-opted into
no,
a little
no.
cute little Hinduism.
It's the original love jihad. You're falling for a.
That's exactly right. It's hilarious.
I mean,
Uh,
the movie does really have all the trappings of, a perfect, a quintessential sports movie, right? That we kind of
100%.
wanted to unpack. Like it creates, like I said, there's a team full of underdogs who are you are rooting for. There is a very clear other villain who you want to overcome. It is a David and Goliath story, and in the sense, so what my issue with sports movies has always been this idea of the sort of us versus them that it creates, right? And we love a David and Goliath story because traditionally, when not perverted by sports movies, there is the underdog story appeals to our sense of justice. It appeals to our sense of you don't have to have power and privilege and etc etc
Sure.
in order to succeed. It taps into all those innate fundamental things that we consider to be good human qualities.
Hmm.
um, but the issue with sports movies, and with Lagan, I want to sort of bring up this other movie. If you think Lagan is bad, 83, which is about India's winning of their first cricket World Cup in 1983 under the captaincy of Kapil Dev, with Ranveer Singh horribly essaying the role of Kapil Dev.
Yep.
Um, in Lagan, there is a clear other, but there is no desire to be validated by the other, right? There's no desire that you are going to beat someone at their own game. And the end goal is not just that. It is that you have to be accepted into that club of elite, of superior. Like, you have to say, not only did I beat you, I belong here.
Hmm.
And that's what 83 does. 83, when Lagan created this sort of like, again, this nationalistic fervor, this idea of India, blah, blah, it stopped there. And I give it credit for that, because 83 says somehow the villain in 83 is the West Indies, because they are the dominant cricket team. Never mind that they're a post colonial nation who beat all odds to become titans of the sport. They are portrayed as total, savages, and they are the reigning champions. And India has never won a match. And the aim is for India to end up to overthrow essentially the West Indies and take that spot as the number one team. It is to be finally acknowledged by the British, and finally for them to say to you, oh, actually, maybe you are one of us, So all of that, there is some like vague racist narrative in the film where there are some racist kind of like comments about the Indians in the newspapers or whatever, but those are not portrayed as inherently wrong. In fact, they are portrayed as things that need to be overcome in order to show to the British that actually we are excellent at this and we are
Yeah.
a part of your team.
Of course,
So it
what
is,
struck me was the anti-blackness too, portraying the
yes.
West Indies team as these sort of beastly folks and so on. Yeah.
Yeah, no, and so that's my problem with the underdog story, is that it creates this very particular sort of other that you root for, with the end goal being not that these systems under which the underdog is operating is challenged,
Hmm.
not that the table is broken down by the underdog, but the underdog actually needs to be revalidated and proclaimed as elite by the elite. And you've seen this in 83, you see this in even Cool Runnings, in any number of movies. The aim is to become the elite and to be validated. That's the real issue, I feel, with the underdog narrative.
Hmm.
Yeah. Also,
Yeah.
another thing you see in these movies is that you really don't see the structural systemic impediments that sports persons in India have, right? I think caste and class plays a huge role in who gets to do all of this.
Hmm.
And that aspect, every underdog movie, there is always is one villain, like this guy who's a board of trying to sabotage, but then they triumph. But the sabotage is not an individual, right? So these sabotages are often outsourced to one bad apple,
Yeah.
but never the system that kind of shows you what it means to make it there. When we were researching for this episode, I came across this Anurag Kashyap movie. I think it's called Mukabas, which was in 2017 film, which actually is one of the few exceptions
Hmm.
where you really see what it means. This sports person starts wants to get into the thing. He starts by working for the local politician. You really see, he's a boxer. You really see the struggle, the nastiness, the caste,
Hmm.
the class, the horrible, cruel things that good people have to do in order to get in life, which feels it's very Anurag Kashyap. The life is like short, nasty, and brutish view of the world. But that is an exception, right? Because eventually, as you said, you thank the nation.
Hmm.
Hmm.
The person who hinders you is always an exception. It's one bad apple. It's never the system. It's never the millions of talented people who never got to make it, but that one person.
Yeah. But I think one of the things that's interesting to me about these sports movies is that they all, there is a perception, or there is a kind of innate understanding that India does not do good funding for sports other than cricket. Okay, that it does not do funding. Even in 83, you see that they are not well funded, that's a whole
Yeah.
kind of issue, and so on. And there is a constant discourse they don't fund them well. They are particularly bad when it comes to women's sports. You see that in Chak, you see that in Dangal, you see that in Shabash Mittu, you see that in Mary Kom, that women are treated particularly badly. So what happens is that these movies stage a kind of critique of the corruption within sports federations, or the problems, or the sexism and things like that. But then it's like they won't let it hold, or they won't let it stick. because eventually we all have to be co-opted into this nostalgic
Mm-hmm.
patriotic narrative, which is
Mm-hmm.
particularly rankling for the boxer from Manipur, because I watched Mary Kom, and of course, the xenophobia and how people talk about the Northeast in India is so disgusting. And then you had Priyanka Chopra play and get fit and all this stuff for this role, and they actually did prosthetic eye makeup for her to make her eyes look more Asian, more Northeastern. And this is already so preposterous. And then the language they speak in this kind of strange Hindi that is often associated, and Hindi that you mock people from other parts of India
Mm-hmm.
for. And so they it's grammatically wrong and things like that. It's like, why are they talking like that between them? So there is so much inauthenticity around that. But at some point, she's declaring, I'm Indian, I'm Indian, just because I'm from Manipur. How can you say I'm not Indian? And it's just like she's like begging to be co-opted into the national story, and it's kind of painful to
Sad.
see, given what we know of what happens in the Northeast
Did
in Manipur.
I'm wondering, did Mary Kom actually want to be, or is it just something with cinematic license that kind of erases
I have
histories of?
I have no idea, obviously, but of course, I mean, she represented India and won gold again and again and again. So it would be important for her career to be seen as an Indian. But whatever prejudices she is experiencing, you know, it's like Priyanka Chopra declares it and declares it to be. She begs to be part of this national narrative
Yeah,
in a
that's the
very
thing, right?
strange way.
You have to become subsumed and accepted by the elite, like whether you are going to be accepted as an Indian or whether you're going to be an Indian who gets accepted by the British as actually a good cricket playing nation. It is all about defining yourself in opposition to the other,
Yeah.
essentializing yourself, and then saying that my entire personhood depends on your validation of me and being able to occupy the same corridors as you do.
I was on a long flight and ended up watching a film with Akshay Kumar called Gold, which is about
Oh,
Indian hockey team winning their first gold in, of course, based on, lightly on a true story. It's the 1948 Summer Olympics, and basically what has happened is originally the Indian team has played as UK, as not UK, as England, and then as India starts to gain independence, they want to play as themselves because they've been humiliated and they've been treated badly, and they win prizes, but then they have to hold up the British flag and all this kind of stuff. And you have like parody, like Hitler coming to watch the games and all this kind of crazy stuff. But then 1948 comes, and Akshay Kumar, who's a drunk Bengali, brings a ragtag team together, not really ragtag, but a decent hockey team together, and they play. But then, alas, the partition happens. So suddenly the Muslim players have to end up on the other side. And
no way.
yeah, and then what are we going to do? And then finally, it's the finale. And then, making it to the finals are Pakistan and India. And basically the allegiance between all these people are split because they used to play with
Play
these
together.
guys, and now it's they are part of another team, and how to defeat them. But there's so much love between them, and you're like, oh my god, why was there ever a partition? I wish we were all together, and so on and so forth. So I mean, we have dug and dug into the annals of history to manufacture this nostalgia. I mean, it is out of
It's
control.
true.
This movie is particularly like, it's made in such an over curated hammy way that it's hard to. It's, to me, Lagan is also hammy and over curated, so there's a part of that doesn't elicit in me the response. But I see what they're doing.
But if these are hammy, I think there are two films that do this, in my opinion, quite well. Very cringe, but quite well. One is the Shah Rukh Khan School of Chak De,
Oh my
which is
god.
also very similar to Swades, like this outsider coming. But Chak De is for me this moment where you really see the figure of the good Muslim being
Right.
embossed into the national consciousness. I remember very clearly having these two magazines in my house, one that had Abdul Kalam Azad playing the Rudravina, where someone's like, oh, look at this. You have like a Muslim, we have a Sikh prime minister, a Muslim
Yeah,
as a president, like a Muslim president who plays the Rudravina, who's a Shiva Bhakt. And then I remember seeing like Chak Day, like the Chak Day. There was another, I don't remember if these covers ended up in the doctor's office, or I just remember, I just that visual of these two covers
yeah,
stays. And I think it's a very particular kind of India, right? The
Right.
Muslim who is a scientist and the Muslim who is like,
yeah.
comes back to win this thing for India. But also, this is a point that you made, Bhakti, but even when and this is about a hockey coach, about his women's team, but it's not about the women's team, it's about
No,
him.
no, it's not about women. It's
Has
it's
nothing to
it's
do
a
with
one
them.
man show, and it's Shah Rukh. And then you get the same mythology in Dangal.
Dangal.
With Amir Khan playing the father of these two wrestlers. I mean, a true story that they really took to dramatic lies, especially at the end of the end of the film. But you have these stories. The underdog is quite simply the woman.
Hmm.
Women in sports are deeply undervalued in India, to the point that we had all kinds of scandals only over a year or so ago. It's so bad. There is zero funding. Even with cricket, it's slightly getting better, but cricket, if it's bad, imagine the other sports. It's just abysmal. And so you have these movies that can engage the cause a little bit, but God forbid the Khans come, the superstars of Bollywood, and then they make the entire movie about themselves. Because what did we get from Dangal? I will never remember the name of either of those girls who played the wrestlers. What I do remember is, oh, Amir Khan, and all the little reels and videos of him and his fitness regime, getting.
Yes.
Why? Because he has to play a wrestler for 5 minutes, because what they want to show is that he used to be a wrestler once upon a time. And that thing lasts for 5 minutes. But for that, they made so much hype and so much drama, and that's all you know. Amir Khan did a lot of work for this role. Same thing with Shah Rukh Khan. He played this incredible role, and he did all this stuff, and he motivated this team. And that's it. That's what it becomes about. Mary Kom too. It's a lot about the guys. It's not as bad actually, but it's a lot about the men in her life. The coach, the husband who supports her no matter what, despite her masculinity, her rage issues. So we just can't get a win out of these.
But also, I just want to say, when you're talking about the wrestlers,
Yeah,
the actual women wrestlers in India who won Olympic were protesting
yeah,
against India's the head of India's wrestling chief, the Brij Bhushan Sharan Singh,
yeah.
who had a long history and still has a long history of sexually assaulting female athletes. These are your Olympians
That's right.
fighting, and there's this very, very terrible photograph of these women being dragged away by other police officers, and it's just like, and again now it's gone, right? Like this, the public memory of what actually happens to female wrestlers or athletes is that sexual abuse. You have to be pliable, you have to, you have to be exceptionally good, you have to deal with the patriarchy at home, you have to deal with the biology, you have to deal with what happens when you get married, and then you have to deal with these, I'm sorry, these assholes who are these in
Absolutely.
various sports federations. The sexual assaults that come from everybody, from the guy who decides if you're going to go play or the coach. And then finally you make it. And then who gets the credit? The nation.
Yeah, exactly. And it's very strange, and I don't know why these movies have to replicate these ideas. But what always interests me, of course, is stylistically how formulaic it is. Like, I will shed a tear no matter what. Like
I
Lagan.
love the formula.
Yeah, the formula, it works. It is tight, man. They have
Yeah.
nailed this thing in
And the
Hollywood, in
music,
Europe,
they've
in
nailed the
Bollywood,
music
everywhere.
too.
And the music, yeah, absolutely, the music too.
Big, epic sort
Crescendo.
of, yes,
Yeah,
and you're just like, you can't help it, But
yeah,
yeah, I love the formula.
yeah.
It's
It really works every single time. It's one of the very late kind of things in India where they've started to generate these biopics of sports figures, where the person tries to resemble and talk like the original person and things like that. That's also a sort of innovation within that. You had the Dhoni movie where he tried to do
mm,
that.
Sushant Singh Rajput, right? The young actor who.
Yeah, exactly. So there is something about sports films that pushes Bollywood to do better in some way, or to engage with the genre differently than, like, the Pathan, Rocky Rani, Animal, that world, because it's so disgusting and it's unwatchable, for the most part. Compared to that, the fluidity of these narratives, or the challenges that the filmmaker has to take to actually create a coherent script, there is something where it
Interesting.
improves Bollywood mechanics, in filmmaking, and makes these movies just way more watchable and more interesting. But of course, the issue of patriotism, that is a real problem, and it wouldn't be that bad if India wasn't moving towards where it is, or India wouldn't be in the place that it is today, which is
Hmm.
which is such a bad place.
Do
Yeah,
you
and
think vernacular films do this better because they are not really, you know, I'm thinking, I'm only thinking in terms of Tamil. You have the
Yeah.
Sarpata Paramparai Paranjit's film that talks about boxing, but within the context of North Madras and what
Mhm.
happens to these Dalit communities. You have Chennai 28, which was about a bunch of guys in this locality who play local cricket, but then the cricket is about passion. It's not about the nation. It's really about these few guys.
correct.
It's a local game. Think that cinema that is not Bollywood in India across India's regions. Do you think they do sports films differently or maybe better because they're not tied to this idea of the nation?
I think the smaller the film, the better it is, would be my stock answer for this, just because I end up teaching a class on gender and film again and again, actually. And we end up doing these films. Well, there's a film like Bend It Like Beckham, which has this sort of alternate indie success. A lot of people don't know it. We know it because we are Indian, and it's such a adorable film, and which deals with very different issues, migration, family. What were you talking
I,
about?
I said Kira Knightley.
And then it made Kira Knightley who she is, which just kills me, by the way. But
and Jonathan Rhys Meyers too.
ugh,
Yeah,
I know,
It
I
did
know.
launch
Take
them.
you take an Indian film and the Indian actress, nobody knows anything, but the other ones are stars. It's sort of intense to see how that played out. But also films like very small film with Michelle Rodriguez called Girl Fight, which is very tiny, much lesser known, and a lot of flaws, of course. But I think they managed to get localized realities and not really engage with the patriotism as much as these Hindi language Bollywood films at the end of the day. So even though I haven't seen many of these Tamil films, I would say just by the size of it, there's a victory there already.
And I think there's also a history in Bollywood of sort of peddling state narratives. Like it's what they've always done.
Yeah.
They've always sort of had this social messaging or whatever that is very pro, um, that is just about the state. Like it doesn't really question the state. It doesn't really question, and it's used, members from marginalized communities to do so,
Hmm.
and to launder the image of the state and to create this uncritical feeling of like, oh, we are Indian and manufactured patriotism and nation building. It has always been Bollywood's thing to do. So
Absolutely.
maybe, if there are, again, I'm also not so familiar with regional films on sports, but maybe they are also pushing the boundaries of that formula that we're talking about that we don't
Hmm.
really like, and talking. And
Yeah.
that's kind of what I meant by this like David and Goliath narrative, where David is not trying to become Goliath. That's it.
Hmm.
You just want to beat the bad guy, and that's it. You're not trying to be the bad guy.
Yeah.
With Bollywood, you're always trying to be better than the bad guy. You always want to be like, and that's really annoying. And
I
it's
know.
really annoying because it goes also against, what we love about underdogs, also what we love about sports.
Hmm.
Like it stops being about sportsmanship and the fun of the game and the other aspects of it, like losing with grace or dignity or whatever it is. And it makes it this entirely narcissistic pursuit. And
Absolutely.
this is just Bollywood's
and,
MO.
and just to add, the sort of image of masculinity that it
Yeah.
perpetrates, because what the story of the underdog is a rural kid who's scrawny,
Yeah.
we don't know, has some talent. Like, I'm thinking about the Milkha Singh movie, even the Dhoni movie. You have the idea that you don't see anything special, and
Mm.
then they are built up towards this masculine figures. And then the nostalgia that you get is also in like hearty home remedy worlds. So it's like it's always about the milk or the ghee, you know.
Yes. Yes.
Like there's always these references to like strange food,
Yeah.
and how that's what's a beta tum doodh pee
Don't
lo,
feel.
all this
Exactly. Exactly.
kind of
This is,
strange stuff. So to build yourself into this, into the manhood that is required to save the nation. And it's it's kind of wild. It's really folded in, it's
yeah.
really kind of lubricated and marinated into the story in such a
Yes.
natural way.
Yes, and the way that you're saying it really makes me think like there's two ways to save the nation as a man. You either become a top sports player or you join the army.
Anyway, this was fun, and I just want to say, like, I think we've come out a little bit more pro sports movies than I hoped to, but like we all said, they're hard to resist. They have like some sort of formula that does create some tear cheesy element, rooting for the underdog stuff that we do, or some nostalgia for diversity. I don't know what it is. Something, it gets to you, it pulls at the heartstrings. But I think as these movies become part of the Bollywood landscape, because as I said at the start of our episode, there has been an extraordinary uptick. I mean, there's just been 2 dozen films in the past 10 15 years, and this is kind of crazy actually.
Yeah.
And I think we have to remain vigilant as always to the fascist aesthetics. We know we recorded a whole episode on that, and we have to think also about depictions of masculinity, the able body, all those kinds of things, ways in which these films are also milking all those types of things. And certainly that film Gold that I watched was very much part of that. And now rewatching Lagan, there is a lot of that type of Hindu weird elements in there. And I think we just have to watch them, but try to engage as much of our criticality as we can, because it's very easy to be subsumed. Anyway, this was fun. Thanks both.